Lily Moreno had learned early in life that hope didn't pay the bills. Working double shifts as a nurse at St. Vincent's Hospital, she juggled bedpans, heartbreak, and long nights fueled by vending machine coffee. Her dream of becoming a doctor had been carefully folded and packed away when her mother fell ill. Now, she poured every ounce of her heart into caring for others, even as her own world quietly crumbled. When she was assigned to a private VIP suite, she expected a difficult, demanding family, someone wealthy enough to afford silence. What she found instead was a man who didn't speak at all. He had been in a coma for months. No visitors, no flowers, just tubes, monitors, and the sound of steady beeping. His name, James Carrington. The name meant nothing to her. He was just another patient, one more soul suspended between worlds. Still, something about him made Lily stay longer after each shift. She would read aloud to him, share stories from her childhood, hum quietly while adjusting his IV. Sometimes she spoke to him like he could hear her, telling him about her dreams of medical school, her fears, her fatigue. And sometimes, just sometimes, she thought she saw a flicker in his fingers or a twitch near his eyes. Other nurses called her naive. "He can't hear you," they said. But Lily didn't stop. It wasn't about being heard. It was about giving, about presence, even if no one noticed, even if it changed nothing. What Lily didn't know was that her presence was changing everything. And soon, the man she thought was just another patient would awaken with a memory of her voice, and a secret that would rewrite her life forever. There are stories that warm the heart, and then there are those that shift something inside you forever. Lily's story is not about grand miracles or fame. It's about quiet moments, unseen sacrifices, and the kind of compassion that doesn't ask for recognition. It's about a young woman who gave her all to a stranger in a hospital bed, never knowing he held the power to change her life completely. In a world that often celebrates wealth, power, and big gestures, this story reminds us of the invisible heroes who keep the world turning. Nurses, caregivers, dreamers who hold on even when the odds are stacked against them. Lily never wore a cape. She wore scrubs, hand-me-down sneakers, and a tired smile. She didn't ask for anything. She just gave, day after day, night after night. And sometimes, the universe notices. What happened between Lily and the man in the coma was never about romance. It was about recognition. About how deeply we can touch someone's life without even realizing it. And about how true generosity always finds its way back. Sometimes in ways more powerful than we ever imagined. If you've ever believed in the quiet power of kindness, if you've ever rooted for the underdog, if you've ever needed a reason to believe that goodness still matters, this story is for you. Before we dive deeper, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love hearing your stories too. It helps us feel connected across the miles. Now, let's begin the journey of Lily and the silent man who would change everything. Lily Carter had been a nurse for only a year, but her heart had already borne the weight of a lifetime of suffering. Hospitals weren't just places of healing. They were silent theaters of grief, hope, and stories untold. She worked the night shift at St. Augustine Medical Center, not because it paid more, but because it gave her time during the day to study. Her dream of becoming a doctor hadn't died. It just had to wait. Like everything else in her life, Room 308 became part of her nightly rhythm. A private suite, tucked away at the end of the corridor, where a man named Adrian Cole had lain unconscious for months. No one came to visit. No flowers, no cards. Only a corporate-looking man in a gray suit would check in once a week, sign some papers, and leave. No name tags, no explanations. Just silence. Adrian Cole was listed in the system as private status, meaning little was known or shared about him. Lily had no idea he was one of the wealthiest CEOs in the country, known for tech ventures and ruthless takeovers. She only knew him as the quiet man with salt and pepper hair and a faint scar above his right brow. To her, he wasn't a billionaire. He was simply Mr. Cole, the man she read to when she had a spare moment and played classical music for when the ward was quiet. Every night she spoke to him. Not because she thought he could hear, but because it felt right. She told him about her long shifts, her dreams of med school, the patients who made her laugh, and the ones who broke her heart. "You're the best listener I've ever had," she'd say, smiling as she adjusted his IV. The hospital staff often teased her gently. "Falling for your sleeping prince, Lily?" they joked. But she laughed it off. It wasn't love. It was something different. A connection, maybe. A quiet understanding in a world that rarely slowed down enough to see people for who they truly were. One night, during a particularly heavy storm, the power flickered and the backup generator kicked in. Lily was doing rounds when she heard a faint groan from room 308. She rushed in, heart pounding, and found Adrian's fingers twitching. His eyes fluttered open for the first time in 6 months. Confused, frightened, alive. "You're okay," she whispered, placing a calming hand on his arm. "You're safe. You've been asleep for a while." He stared at her, eyes glassy and unsure. A single tear slid down his cheek. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper. A soul returning to itself. Over the next few days, Adrian's recovery was slow. Speech returned gradually. He remained distant, quiet, but his eyes followed Lily wherever she went. When she smiled, he smiled. When she read to him, he closed his eyes and listened. He asked simple questions. "What's your name? How long have I been here?" But never. "Who am I?" She didn't pry. She respected boundaries. To her, he was just another patient. Fragile, human, healing. She brought him tea when the doctors allowed it, and sometimes sneaked in pieces of chocolate. "Don't tell anyone," she'd wink. He never did. Instead, he watched her with the kind of gaze that made her wonder if he remembered everything, or nothing at all. What Lily didn't know was that Adrian remembered more than he let on. He had overheard her voice in the haze of his coma. Her words had been the only thread pulling him back from the void. And now, as he studied her soft eyes and worn-out sneakers, he saw something he hadn't seen in years: sincerity, the kind of care no money could buy. Adrian Cole was a name that commanded boardrooms, moved markets, and instilled fear in competitors. But in the sterile quiet of room 308, it meant nothing. He didn't tell Lily who he was, not because he didn't trust her, but because for the first time in his life, someone saw him without the weight of his title. And that anonymity felt sacred. Lily had no idea the man she brought soup to was once the CEO of a billion-dollar tech conglomerate. She assumed he was someone with a decent family who could afford a private room and a quiet recovery. She never asked questions beyond what the chart allowed. She respected patients' privacy like it was holy, and Adrian noticed that. As his body grew stronger, so did his desire to know her more deeply. He began to ask questions that had little to do with his care. "Why did you become a nurse? What's the hardest part of your job? What's your dream?" At first, she answered shyly, but over time, her answers came with laughter, with frustration, with raw honesty. "I want to be a doctor," she confessed one night, sitting in the chair beside him with her legs curled beneath her scrubs. "I've wanted that since I was 8, but med school isn't cheap, and I don't have parents who can help. So, I work. I save. I hope." Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. She never cried. Adrian listened, and as he listened, something stirred inside him that felt unfamiliar. Guilt. Not for deceiving her, but for how much his world had forgotten people like her. People who worked 16-hour shifts, skipped meals, and still smiled. People whose dreams weren't yachts or private jets, but a classroom and a white coat with their name stitched on it. He started taking more walks around the hospital. Aided by a cane and cleared by doctors, Adrian wandered the corridors quietly, dressed in donated clothes, blending in like any other recovering man. He watched Lily in motion, comforting a child, holding an elderly hand, catching a falling tray with reflexes born of exhaustion and grace. One afternoon, he passed the staff lounge and overheard her laughing with another nurse. "I swear," she said between giggles, "if I ever get rich, I'm building a hospital where the patients don't sleep on plastic pillows and the nurses don't run on vending machine coffee." The others laughed, but Adrian didn't. He filed it away. By the 3rd week of his recovery, Adrian had quietly instructed his attorney to place all public-facing updates about him on hold. No press releases, no hospital disclosures, no movement of funds that would alert the business world. He needed time. Time to be invisible. To understand the woman who had unknowingly helped him heal. He also asked his assistant to investigate Lily Carter. Nothing invasive, just the basics. He discovered she was raised in foster care, had graduated top of her nursing class, and was taking pre-med night courses at a local community college. Her record was spotless. Her life was ordinary. But to Adrian, it was extraordinary. That night, back in room 308, Adrian asked her a final question. "Do you believe in second chances?" Lily tilted her head, smiling gently. "I believe people change when someone believes in them." Adrian nodded, his throat tight. Because in her, he had found something no wealth could buy: belief. And slowly, a plan began to take shape in his mind. Not for revenge, not for legacy, but for redemption. Lily noticed the subtle changes first. The man in room 308, once pale and detached, was now alert, his eyes following her with interest, his posture straighter, his voice steadier. Most patients in long-term recovery drifted between silence and small talk. But Adrian was different. There was an intensity behind his gaze, like a man who had just remembered who he was. One morning, while adjusting his blanket, she found a scrap of paper on his nightstand. A rough sketch of a building layout, with scribbles that made little sense to her. Elevators, a research wing, patient gardens. "Are you an architect?" she asked casually, folding the sheet before handing it back. Adrian only smiled and said, "Just dreaming out loud." Lily didn't press. She never did. That was one of the things Adrian admired most, her refusal to pry. But deep inside, a small tug of curiosity pulled at her. The man with the warm voice and quiet charm. Why did he never have visitors? No friends? No family? No flowers or cards? It was unusual. But she told herself to stop wondering. Not everyone has someone. Meanwhile, outside the hospital walls, the absence of Adrian Cole sent quiet tremors through the corporate world. Stockholders whispered, board members waited for his return, and press agents prepared for a potential obituary. But Adrian had made sure that only one person held the truth of his location, his lawyer, sworn to secrecy. Inside, Adrian's transformation continued. He asked Lily more about her pre-med classes, her struggles with organic chemistry, her favorite professors. She would light up when talking about school. "I failed my first anatomy exam," she once admitted with a smirk. "But I aced everyone after that. I just needed to know what failure felt like." That night, Adrian lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The IV drip hummed beside him. He thought about his own rise, how he had stepped over people to climb, how he had once fired a single mother for missing a meeting to attend her son's surgery. He remembered her tears. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, it haunted him. The next day, he sat with Lily during her break. She had brought a sandwich and a cup of instant noodles. "Is that your lunch?" he asked, concerned. She laughed. "Some days it's gourmet, other days it's survival." He looked at the cup, steam rising from the lid, and felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Shame. That same evening, he asked her one more question. "If you had all the money in the world, would you still want to be a doctor?" Lily didn't even hesitate. "Yes, but I'd open a clinic where people didn't have to choose between treatment and groceries." Adrian said nothing, but inside he made another silent note. In the following days, Adrian requested a wheelchair and began exploring the hospital more independently. He passed by the free clinic downstairs, watched parents clutching prescriptions they couldn't afford, saw patients turned away for lack of insurance. He had built hospitals before, donated millions to healthcare tech, but never once stood in these lines, heard these cries, saw the cracks up close. That night, he called his lawyer. "I want everything drafted, quietly. A fund, a foundation, in her name. And I don't want her to know it's from me. Not yet." The lawyer hesitated. "Are you sure?" Adrian's voice didn't waver. "Yes. For once, I want to build something that matters. Not for legacy. For Lily." And with that, the first brick of something life-changing was laid. Quietly, in the shadow of a hospital hallway. Lily noticed the subtle changes first. The man in room 308, once pale and detached, was now alert, his eyes following her with interest, his posture straighter, his voice steadier. Most patients in long-term recovery drifted between silence and small talk. But Adrian was different. There was an intensity behind his gaze, like a man who had just remembered who he was. One morning, while adjusting his blanket, she found a scrap of paper on his nightstand. A rough sketch of a building layout, with scribbles that made little sense to her. Elevators, a research wing, patient gardens. "Are you an architect?" she asked casually, folding the sheet before handing it back. Adrian only smiled and said, "Just dreaming out loud." Lily didn't press. She never did. That was one of the things Adrian admired most, her refusal to pry. But deep inside, a small tug of curiosity pulled at her. The man with the warm voice and quiet charm. Why did he never have visitors? No friends? No family? No flowers or cards? It was unusual. But she told herself to stop wondering. Not everyone has someone. Meanwhile, outside the hospital walls, the absence of Adrian Cole sent quiet tremors through the corporate world. Stockholders whispered, board members waited for his return, and press agents prepared for a potential obituary. But Adrian had made sure that only one person held the truth of his location, his lawyer, sworn to secrecy. Inside, Adrian's transformation continued. He asked Lily more about her pre-med classes, her struggles with organic chemistry, her favorite professors. She would light up when talking about school. "I failed my first anatomy exam," she once admitted with a smirk. "But I aced everyone after that. I just needed to know what failure felt like." That night, Adrian lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The IV drip hummed beside him. He thought about his own rise, how he had stepped over people to climb, how he had once fired a single mother for missing a meeting to attend her son's surgery. He remembered her tears. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, it haunted him. The next day, he sat with Lily during her break. She had brought a sandwich and a cup of instant noodles. "Is that your lunch?" he asked, concerned. She laughed. "Some days it's gourmet, other days it's survival." He looked at the cup, steam rising from the lid, and felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Shame. That same evening, he asked her one more question. "If you had all the money in the world, would you still want to be a doctor?" Lily didn't even hesitate. "Yes, but I'd open a clinic where people didn't have to choose between treatment and groceries." Adrian said nothing, but inside he made another silent note. In the following days, Adrian requested a wheelchair and began exploring the hospital more independently. He passed by the free clinic downstairs, watched parents clutching prescriptions they couldn't afford, saw patients turned away for lack of insurance. He had built hospitals before, donated millions to healthcare tech, but never once stood in these lines, heard these cries, saw the cracks up close. That night, he called his lawyer. "I want everything drafted, quietly. A fund, a foundation, in her name. And I don't want her to know it's from me. Not yet." The lawyer hesitated. "Are you sure?" Adrian's voice didn't waver. "Yes. For once, I want to build something that matters. Not for legacy, for Lily." And with that, the first brick of something life-changing was laid, quietly, in the shadow of a hospital hallway. The days following the dinner blurred into a surreal dream. Lily went to work as usual, but everything felt different. The walls of the hospital no longer echoed with exhaustion alone. They now held possibility. Each time she passed room 308, she paused briefly, remembering the man who had once occupied it, and who now, in a single act, had shifted the course of her life. The scholarship sat on her nightstand like a promise waiting to bloom. She reread the documents a dozen times, still half convinced they might vanish. The name of the sponsoring foundation was discreet. The Whitestone Initiative. But a footnote at the bottom made her heart flutter. In honor of those who heal in silence. She didn't need to ask. She knew Adrian had created it for her. They met again, this time by chance. Lily was leaving the hospital after a long shift when she saw Adrian in the lobby, dressed down in jeans and a navy coat, speaking quietly to a nurse at the front desk. Their eyes met. He smiled first. "Still saving lives?" he asked. She nodded. "Still hiding your fortune in rooftop dinners?" They talked outside in the cold. There was a comfort now, a rhythm in their conversation that didn't need explanations. "You didn't have to do that," Lily said, referring to the scholarship. Adrian's expression softened. "I didn't do it out of guilt. I did it because I saw what you're capable of. I just had the resources to clear the path." But something about his calm unnerved her. "Why me?" she finally asked. "You could have helped anyone." Adrian looked away for a moment, then back. "Because when I was nothing more than a body on a bed, you treated me like a human being. Not a task, not a burden. You didn't know who I was, and you still gave me dignity. That changes a man." Lily absorbed his words in silence. For so long she had thought her kindness was just habit, instinct born from struggle. But now, she realized, kindness had been her currency in a world obsessed with wealth. And somehow, that currency had changed the life of a man who once had everything but still felt empty. Weeks passed. Their meetings became more frequent. Coffee after shifts, walks in the city, quiet lunches tucked away from the noise. Rumors swirled at the hospital, of course, but neither cared. They were building something unspoken, something rooted not in grand gestures but in quiet understanding. Lily's university admission came through in early spring. She cried alone on her rooftop, clutching the letter to her chest. The acceptance wasn't just academic, it was personal. It was proof that she belonged, that she wasn't a visitor in a world built for others, and she knew who she wanted to tell first. She found Adrian in his office downtown, a minimalist space with towering windows and not a single picture on the walls. "I got in," she said simply. His eyes lit up. "Of course you did." He stood, walked around the desk, and before she could think, he wrapped her in a hug. Not romantic, not rehearsed, just real. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "You're going to change lives, Lily." As she left his office that day, she turned back and smiled. "So are you," she said. Adrian looked puzzled. "You don't see it," she added. "But what you did for me, it matters. It's more than a check. It's a legacy." He didn't reply, just watched her go, something glistening in his eyes. And in that silence, a bond formed stronger than contracts or gratitude. Two souls once broken by life, now quietly rebuilding each other. The first day of medical school felt like walking into a world Lily had only observed from a distance. White coats fluttered in the breeze like flags of conquest. The halls buzzed with ambition, laughter, and nerves. But Lily, dressed in a second-hand blazer and holding a used backpack, stood proudly among them. She belonged, not because of money or lineage, but because she had earned her place with quiet sacrifice and relentless hope. Adrian watched her from afar that morning. He sat in his car, just across the street from the university entrance, hidden behind tinted windows. There was no grand goodbye, no final speech. He simply needed to see her begin. He smiled as she vanished through the doors. Let her go, he told himself. This is her story now. Back at the hospital, whispers of Lily's journey inspired others. Nurses talked about applying for school again. Janitors asked about scholarships, and patients shared her story with visitors. What had started as a quiet act of kindness had become a ripple touching corners even she couldn't see. One person's rise had given others permission to dream. Lily never forgot Adrian, though they spoke less frequently. Their paths had diverged with purpose, not bitterness. He had given her wings, but she had to learn how to fly on her own. Still, on evenings when the campus library emptied and loneliness crept in, she sometimes received a message from him. Short, simple, meaningful. "Keep going," one said. Another, "You were born for this." Meanwhile, Adrian turned his focus inward. For the first time in years, he stepped back from boardrooms and meetings, choosing to volunteer quietly at a clinic on weekends. He listened to stories from people who had nothing but still offered kindness. It reminded him of Lily, and it reminded him of himself, before wealth dulled his senses. On her first clinical rotation, Lily met a patient who reminded her of Adrian, a wealthy man, unconscious and alone. This time, she was on the other side of the story, donning the white coat and taking charge. She treated him with the same dignity she once offered a stranger in a coma. But now, she understood the weight of that act. Kindness wasn't just instinct, it was power. Months passed. Seasons changed. Lily became one of the top students in her class, not because she was the smartest, but because she was relentless. She showed up early, stayed late, and cared deeply. Professors noticed. Patients remembered her name. Classmates leaned on her. Her presence made the world feel steadier, more humane. One rainy afternoon, she received a package with no return address. Inside was a stethoscope, elegant, engraved with her name, and a handwritten note. For every heart you'll heal, never forget the one you healed first. She didn't need a signature. She knew it was from Adrian. Tears welled in her eyes, but not from sadness, from gratitude, from history, from knowing that some connections, though quiet, are eternal. On the night of her white coat ceremony, she stood before a crowd of professors, peers, and family members. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "I didn't get here alone," she began. "Someone once told me that dignity is the greatest gift you can offer another human being. I'm standing here because someone believed in me when they had no reason to. And now it's my turn to pass that belief forward." As applause filled the auditorium, Lily scanned the crowd. In the back row, barely visible, stood Adrian. No spotlight, no recognition. Just a proud, quiet presence. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the noise faded. In that silent exchange, a story that began in silence and shadows reached its luminous finale. What started as a quiet act of care had become a legacy of hope, and both of them, once lost in very different ways, had finally come home. Life doesn't always give us heroes in shining armor. Sometimes it gives us nurses in quiet rooms and broken men lying still. Sometimes it gives us a story that doesn't begin with love, but ends with it, in its purest, most transformative form. Lily and Adrian never set out to change each other's lives. Yet, through kindness, resilience, and truth, they rewrote their fates together. The world moved on. New patients came, new dreams formed, but the legacy they built endured. The scholarship fund continued to grow, now touching the lives of dozens of students who, like Lily once was, stood on the edge of giving up. And every year, without fail, Adrian would send a single note to each new recipient. "The world needs your light. Don't let anything dim it." Lily's story was never about saving a billionaire, and Adrian's story wasn't about being saved. It was about what happens when two souls meet in the silence of struggle and choose to rise, together. In a world full of noise and chaos, they found something rare: meaning. And in that meaning, they discovered the quiet miracle that hope, once planted, never stops growing.